Hello and welcome to the DARPA Launch Challenge. Astra will try to accomplish the first launch of the DARPA Launch Challenge, successfully delivering a payload into low Earth orbit from Pacific Spaceport Complex, Alaska on Kodiak Island. A successful payload deployment will garner Astra a $2 million DARPA Launch Challenge prize and set the company up for Launch 2, just days away from a chance at an additional $10 million. On Friday, Astra conducted the wet dress rehearsal, a practice session for all the key players involved in the actual launch attempt. The wet dress rehearsal involved fueling Astra's rocket 1 of 3 with RPX fuel and liquid oxygen and performing a practice launch countdown. Since then, teams in Kodiak have been performing procedures to recycle the rocket and prepare it for a launch attempt today. So here we are. Unfortunately, today we encountered some issues with the weather. The news is not very good, so in order to fill us in more and explain where we are, we'd like to introduce you once again to DARPA Launch Challenge Program Manager Todd Master. Todd, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
So the teams began the countdown today, went into fueling the rocket. But the entire time we're assessing 2 major issues with weather. One of them is upper level winds.
Right.
The other is thick clouds that can trigger lightning when the rocket passes through it, both of which are kind of showstoppers.
They can be. And either one of those cases, both those conditions, triggered lightning is what we consider a mandatory condition. If we have cloud conditions that put us in a case where that is anticipated, that is a no-go. And we're stopped for that day for launch attempts. When it comes to upper level winds, it's highly dependent on the actual sort of direction and speed of those winds and where it's coming. The team here at Astra takes data from a weather balloon that we send up, assesses whether or not their vehicle is going to be able to stay on course, and makes while it starts out as a red, it can turn back to green if the data is favorable.
And today, both of those factors were not working in our favor. But the Astra team has been working toward a launch.
Right. So what we did today was we started our launch countdown, and it typically begins, the first thing we do before we even step into that count is to start with a weather briefing. So we look through what are the constraints today, what's the probability of violation of each of those constraints. When we started that count, those weather constraints we're looking at, like I said, triggered lightning at a 90% probability of violation, and then our upper level winds were also a 90% chance of violation. Again, they can change dynamically during the day. The other things that we've seen that have changed a little bit more since we started are we're seeing deteriorating weather conditions out on the pad from a surface level wind standpoint. And while we probably haven't necessarily violated the criteria to launch, it definitely makes it harder for the launch crew who's preparing as we start to have higher winds and there's quite a bit of precipitation. I think you can probably have seen on one of our cameras earlier that the weather is deteriorating as the day goes on. So the team at Astra is looking at the probability they would actually be able to launch today, which was looking slim and getting slimmer based on weather. But we're still trying to understand which issues we want to, how we can convince ourselves that the rocket will be ready to launch on today or a future launch attempt.
So there were a couple of items that were still kind of hanging in the balance as a result of the wet dress rehearsal yesterday. Mm-hmm. And going a little further into the count today, even knowing that you're not going to launch, could benefit you and Astra.
Yeah, that's right. So yesterday we conducted our wet dress rehearsal. We accomplished most of the goals of that. We had a few things that needed to be fixed as a result, relatively minor fixes, but things that you want to verify and make sure that they're safe, and make sure it's going to help be fixed adequately for the rocket to get to orbit. So they implemented those fixes after WDR yesterday. And the intent was we were going to check those out during the countdown today in preparation for a launch at the beginning of the window. We know that the beginning to the end of the launch window today is a likely scrub for weather. However, we've decided that we still want to proceed with a portion of our fueling operations and a portion of our countdown to verify those fixes that were made yesterday.
And then the intent would be to remove the fuel and oxidizer from the rocket and turn things around for another launch opportunity.
Right, that's right. So typically, through the course of the countdown, we would load both fuel and oxidizer into the vehicle, as well as pressurize the vehicle with helium. That operation takes quite a bit of time to get through, and it actually takes quite a bit of time to back out of after you're finished. So After the time that you fully loaded your vehicle, you've loaded it with cryogens, the vehicle is cooled down, you're looking at information about how the vehicle is responding, you've loaded it with fuel, you've loaded it with helium. From that time that we decide we like how it looks and we start to pull all those commodities back out of the vehicle, it's several hours for the operation.
And from a safety standpoint, and the prudent thing to do with knowing that you're going to have pad team that's engaged in these operations with deteriorating weather, the right thing to do would be knowing that you're looking at several hours and the weather is going to continue to get worse, to kind of call it and not put them through that.
Yeah, so what we've decided to do today is, in order to verify the system fixes that we made yesterday, is go into a partial loading on the propellants. So we will load helium, fuel, and oxidizer, and we'll make sure that all of the fixes that were put in place from as a result of WDR the integrity of those fixes is working well. Once we know that those are complete, we will back out of the fueling operation before we get to full fill on the vehicle. What that's going to allow us to do is decrease the amount of time in fueling operations, decrease the amount of time in unfueled operations. And I should point out, when you're talking about the launch team on the pad, that team is not in place when we're doing the operations.
Right.
Prior to fueling, they drop back to a safe location away. But they have to get back in once the vehicle is depressurized and defueled to prepare it for, to take down the propellant system and be ready for another attempt later.
Right. Well, so that takes us to the next question, which is, where do you think that we stand in terms of the next launch opportunity?
Yeah, that is a great question. So the way that we have set this up is that every day we have, for the course of the window, DARPA basically had a 14-day window in which we had asked our team to be able to launch from the first day that we identified to the last day of the window. Today is day 13 of that window. We've had a series of good weather days, what we call green days. We've had about 4 of those. We've had a series of days that were marginal, where we had mostly green conditions, but some that could be analyzed depending on the day. And then finally, we had a few that were red. So tomorrow is looking like a red day. We're going to get through today's operation, see how that goes, and assess from there.
Okay. So in order to track when the next possible launch opportunity is, folks should continue to follow DARPALaunchChallenge.org.
That's right. So we will have that right on the website, basically showing when we expect our next launch opportunity to be, and that is the best place to find that information.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for explaining it. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Take care. And that's all we have for you today. Once again, tune in to www.DARPALaunchChallenge.org for the latest information on the next launch opportunity. Thank you very much.